I still smell the smoke in my dreams. Not the kind from a kitchen or a campfire. The kind that clings to your skin and gets in your eyes. Black, oily smoke that tells you something precious is dying. That night never ended for me. It just buried itself deeper in my bones. But before the fire, before the screams, there was Greenwood. I lived on Easton Street. Third house from the corner. White fence, yellow curtains, and Mama's marigolds blooming under the window. She used to say, "Marigolds keep the devil out." We should have planted more. Greenwood wasn't just a neighborhood. It was a world. Children chased each other down the sidewalk, feet dusty, faces bright. Barbershops buzzed with clippers and conversation. Tailors took measurements while gospel music spilled out from open church doors. My father's shoe shop sat between the bank and Mr. Goodwin's cafe. He'd polish each pair like he was preparing them for heaven. "Your walk says who you are," he'd tell me. "So keep it clean." We had everything we needed. A hospital run by black doctors. A school where we learned our own history. A newspaper that printed our names, our birthdays, our victories. We called it Black Wall Street. Because we built it brick by brick, soul by soul. On Saturday nights, I'd walk past the Dreamland Theater. Couples in satin and shine, men smelling of bay rum and ambition. Jazz floated in the air like perfume. And for a moment, everything felt like it belonged to us. Then came the elevator. They said a black boy attacked a white girl. But I knew Dick Rowland. He shined shoes downtown. Barely 17. He wouldn't harm a fly. Still, the paper printed the headline. "Nab Negro for attacking girl in elevator." By that evening, men in suits and sweat had gathered outside the courthouse. White men, armed, shouting for blood. Some of our men, veterans, went to protect Dick. They had seen war. They carried honor on their shoulders and pistols at their sides. But they were outnumbered, outgunned. I was at home when it began. Mama pulled me by the arm and shoved me beneath the trapdoor in the pantry. "You stay here, no matter what you hear." She pressed her rosary into my hand and closed the lid. From down there, I heard everything. Glass shattering, gunshots cracking like thunder, boots stomping through our house. Then, a sound I'll never forget. A muffled scream that rose into fire. When I crawled out hours later, our house was gone. The walls were black bones, and Mama's marigolds, they were ash. Outside, Greenwood was hell. Fires danced across rooftops. Smoke painted the sky the color of nightmares. Men with torches laughed like it was a holiday. One of them wore a sheriff's badge. I saw a man run with his daughter in his arms. She was limp. Blood trailed down his leg. He screamed, "She's only 4." Nobody stopped. Nobody helped. Planes buzzed overhead. Not to rescue. To destroy. They dropped burning bottles. I saw one land on the roof of the church. It went up like dry paper. The smell was unbearable. Burned hair. Charred wood. And something else. Something sweet and wrong. My father had stayed behind to protect the shop. When I found him, he was slumped behind the counter. One hand still holding a hammer. A bullet hole in his temple. I didn't scream. I couldn't. I just sat with him, stroking the calluses on his hands, wondering how many shoes he'd never finish. The sun rose on ruins. The school was gone. So was the library. Even the trees looked like skeletons. We weren't allowed to grieve. No funerals. No processions. Just ditches and dirt. Insurance companies said it was a riot, not a massacre. So they gave us nothing. We pitched tents where our homes used to be. Cooked beans over open fires. Shared water from rusted buckets. And we looked at each other, silent, haunted, wondering if the world had gone mad. Or just remembered we were never meant to have this. People say Greenwood died. But I say it was murdered. By hate, envy, and the silence of those who watched. Still, I remember. I remember the shine on Daddy's shoes, the syrup on Mama's biscuits, The trumpet cries from Mr. Johnson's porch. I remember who we were. And I tell it now, because if I don't, they'll say it never happened. I didn't speak for 3 days. Not a word. Not even when the Red Cross man asked me my name. I just stared at the bandage on his hand and wondered whose blood it was. The tent was cold at night. It flapped like skin in the wind. Rain came through the seams and soaked the floor. I lay on a pile of blankets that didn't belong to me, next to people I didn't know. All of us waiting for someone to wake us from a nightmare that was real. They handed out soup in tin cups. It tasted like smoke and salt. We didn't ask for seconds. We didn't ask for anything. We had learned what happened when we asked. Everywhere I looked, I saw ghosts. Not the kind that float. The kind that sit beside you in silence. That walk through the rubble where homes once stood. That press against your chest when you try to breathe. I found Mama's rosary. Melted into a lump. I kept it anyway. It burned my palm the first time I held it. But I didn't let go. The papers called it a riot. Said we started it. Said the flames came from our hands. Said we were lucky to be alive. But I knew better. We all did. One woman stood in line for food holding a photo of her daughter. Her face covered in soot. Asking every stranger, "Have you seen her? Her name's Lila. She was wearing yellow." Nobody answered. Nobody had the heart. We built shovels out of broken fences. We dug through ash with our bare hands. Found pieces of our lives. A doll's leg, a burnt Bible, a wedding band stuck in melted glass. A man from Chicago came to photograph the ruins. He called us resilient. I wanted to spit on his shoes. We weren't resilient. We were erased. But we stayed. Some of us tried to rebuild. Others couldn't. Not because they didn't want to, but because the city wouldn't let them. Permits were denied. Insurance refused. They said, Negro property wasn't covered for acts of insurrection. Insurrection? I saw children scream. I saw women shot in the back. I saw men hang from lampposts. That wasn't rebellion. That was a message. And we heard it. But we stayed anyway. One morning, I woke up and saw Mrs. Langston planting marigolds again, in the same place her house used to stand. I walked over, still limping from the cut on my foot. She looked up and said, "Flowers don't care who burned the earth. They bloom anyway." I didn't know whether to cry or smile. So I did both. We built walls out of mud and hope. We opened a new school under a tent. We passed books from hand to hand like treasure. The city sent no help. The country sent no answers. But still, we taught our children to read. One night I sat with my neighbor, an old man who used to teach music. He held a melted trumpet in his lap like a newborn. He whispered, "They didn't kill us. They just thought they did." And in the quiet that followed, I realized something. They burned our homes. They took our fathers. They tried to bury our names. But I still had my voice. And someday, someone would need to hear it. It didn't happen with a parade. There was no governor's apology. No promises from City Hall. No moment where someone shouted, "It's over!" It wasn't. What came after the fire wasn't healing. Not at first. It was limping, dragging one foot after another through mud and memory. Some folks left. I couldn't blame them. They said the ground was cursed, that no good thing could grow here again. But others stayed. We stayed. I helped rebuild the school. Not because I thought it would be safe, but because the children needed somewhere to dream. Even in ruins, they still drew chalk stars on the broken concrete. Mrs. Carter taught reading in the back of a burned-out grocery store. She used charred books and her own stories. And when she read aloud, even the wind stopped to listen. One man rebuilt his home wall by wall, using bricks from 4 other houses. He said, "If we're gonna rise, it'll be from each other." And I remember this boy, Thomas, maybe 12. He had lost both his parents. But he went around the tents, offering people tea he made from wildflowers. Said it helped with nightmares? It didn't. But we drank it anyway. We built a new church with scrap wood. No stained glass. Just planks and nails. But when we sang, lift every voice and sing, I swear the sky opened a little. Some days we wept. Some days we laughed. Some days we just sat in silence. Because grief is loud even when you don't speak it. There were no trials. No punishment. Not a single man was arrested for what happened. Not one. But we remembered. We made quilts with the names of the lost. We buried their stories into every stitch. We passed those quilts down. Memory wrapped us like a blanket. And still, we lived. We danced at weddings under patchwork tarps. We whispered our dreams into the ears of children. We looked at scorched lots and saw gardens. We saw ghosts, yes. But we also saw each other. There was resistance too. Not with guns, but with gospel, with books, with joy. We marched not on streets, but through classrooms, through kitchens, through every breath that dared to hope again. One day, a man from New York came asking questions. He had a notebook and a stiff collar. He said, "We want to tell your story." I looked him in the eyes and said, "Then listen to how we breathe." Because we weren't just victims. We were survivors, builders, mourners, singers, mothers, fathers, children, still here. The corner where my father's shop stood, gone. But if you stand there long enough, you can still feel the rhythm of his hammer, the warmth of his pride, the silence he carried when they took everything but his dignity. They burned our city, but not our truth. They buried our names, but not our stories. And if history refuses to remember, we'll carve our names into its silence. We are not ruins. We are roots. And every voice you hear now, every story that bleeds from the past into the present, that is victory. Not loud, not final, but alive. Years passed. The ash settled, but the pain didn't. I grew older, but I never stopped walking those streets in my mind. Streets that no longer existed, lined with shops that only lived in memory. People called it a riot for decades. History books left us in the footnotes, if they mentioned us at all, and we let them. Because we were tired. Because grief is heavy when it has no name. Because no one wanted to hear about black children burned in their beds, or fathers shot while trying to carry their sons to safety. But I remember Mama's laugh when the biscuits rose just right. I remember Daddy humming when he polished shoes. I remember the way the sunset turned the rooftops gold, right before it all went black. For years I didn't speak of it, not because I forgot, because I didn't think anyone would believe me. But silence is a prison, and I wanted out. So I told my granddaughter. One night, while folding laundry, I told her everything. She didn't cry. She didn't interrupt. She just held my hand and said, "I'm glad you lived." That broke something in me. And maybe that's how healing starts. Not with justice, not with money, but with being heard. Now every year, she lights a candle for the dead. She writes their names on slips of paper and places them under stones. Not because she knew them, but because someone should. I no longer live in Tulsa, but part of me never left. I still dream of red dirt, of jazz on porches, of little girls in yellow dresses who never came home. And I write, because words are stronger than fire. Because memory, once spoken, cannot be buried again. To whoever finds this, in a book, in a story, in a whisper passed down too many times to trace, know this: we were here, we lived, we built something beautiful, and though they tried to burn us away, somehow, we are still glowing in the dark.